Hello and welcome to Off the Fence, a podcast where we deconstruct difficult decision making so we can try to figure out what keeps us stuck and, more importantly, how do we get unstuck? I'm your host, Karen Covey, a former divorce lawyer, mediator, and arbitrator turned coach, author, and entrepreneur. With me today is Mitchell Gordon, and Mitch works exclusively in the area of family law. He has significant experience dealing with both parenting related and financial litigation. Mitchell approaches his cases with the goal of problem solving through the understanding that each client has a unique set of circumstances. He works closely with his clients throughout the legal process to find reasonable and practical solutions. In addition to his litigation experience, Mitch has expertise conducting settlement conferences, drafting marital settlement agreements, parenting agreements, and pre- and post-nuptial agreements. He's also a skilled appellate advocate, having litigated numerous family law cases at the appellate court level, which I am just going to throw in as my own commentary, is not something that every divorce lawyer does, right? Appeals are their own kind of thing, and that Mitch can do both is really kind of extraordinary, right? So, with all of that, Mitch, welcome to the show.
Hi, Karen. Thanks for having me.
I am thrilled to have you because one of the things that was not mentioned in your bio, but that I know, and the reason I wanted to have you on the show is because of your vast expertise in working with addiction in the context of family law. Um, and so, just to sort of kick off the conversation, what kinds of addictions are we talking about here? Is it specifically alcohol? Is it drugs? Is it gambling? Is it porn? Is it all of the above? What kind of addictions show up in family law and what do you work with?
So it's really all the above. The most prevalent is going to be alcohol or drugs, whether those drugs are illegal or even in often cases prescribed drugs where people are abusing prescriptions.
Mhm.
Gambling is a big one, and over the last, I'd say, call it 8 to 10 years, sex addictions.
Yeah, I've talked to people who have porn addictions, and
Yeah,
it's a big thing, and it will tear
yeah,
apart a marriage really quickly.
that's right.
So I guess the first question I have is that's a whole list of different kinds of addictions. Is the way that you approach a divorce different depending on the type of addiction?
So I think so. It has to be. And so, first and foremost, you have to approach a case where there's an addiction, particularly a substance abuse case, different than sort of a, let's call it, regular divorce case or a case without an addiction, because it's a disease, it's a sickness. And saying, well, knock it off, stop. You're gonna have these limitations with the kids. You're gonna get divorced. You're gonna have these whatever hoops to jump through as a result of your addiction. People, if they could stop, they would stop. If it was that simple. So you absolutely have to approach it differently. You know, I really started finding a different way to approach this years ago. When I was involved in a case, I actually represented the addicted party. Mom was an alcoholic. She knew she was an alcoholic. And the record orders, it said she can't drink. And her ex then would file all these contempt petitions against her saying she violated it. And I remember at the time, I was a younger lawyer then, thinking like this makes no sense. She can't, it's a disease, it's an illness. And I spent my time really talking to the judge and convincing a judge like you can't hold somebody in contempt of court over this. It it it's a sickness. And so the approach to a case where there's addiction absolutely has to be different. Then, I guess to answer your more specific question, the type of addiction, absolutely, there are differences because, sorry, because depending on the addiction and depending on the household dynamic, if they're living together or if there are kids, if there are not, it really matters on the approach.
Okay, how does it matter? Let's start with, because I want to get into like various aspects of this, how it makes a difference that a lawyer approaches a case with an addiction issue, and how it matters that the spouse approaches it as well, because those are kind of two different questions. So
Sure.
let's start with the lawyer. What should, if you as a lawyer, you've got a case, you know that there's an addiction issue involved. What do you do differently?
So a couple things. So first and foremost, if there are kids, first and foremost, you have to make sure that there are protections and guardrails around parenting.
Okay, what do you mean by
And
that?
so, if you have, let's just say, for example, you have somebody with a parent with a substance abuse issue.
Mhm.
Well, there are certain tools we have, like, there are handheld breathalyzers that you blow into. They have facial recognition software, and they send almost instantaneous results to anyone you want it sent to. So you can have it sent to me, you can have it sent to you as the coach, you can have it sent to the GAL, the attorney for the children, you can have it sent to all the lawyers, to anybody. And let's say there's a blood alcohol content there. Well, then there may just be an immediate suspension of parenting time. You can have restrictions on driving. You can implement, drug testing, whether it be random urinalyses, whether it be scheduled hair follicles, a combination of all these things. Also, when there are kids, the age of the kid is very important, because, a 14, 15, 16-year-old is going to know that their parent, let's just, I'm going to pick on dad, let's say it's dad, has a drinking problem or substance abuse issue. The older child is going to be more in tune that something's wrong with dad and I'm not getting in the car with
Okay.
dad.
Yeah.
Dad wants to go drive me somewhere, and dad, I know that what's up, and dad's not okay. And they also may have phones to call the other parent, call mom. Hey, dad's not right. Dad's off. Younger kids, they don't know. It's just dad. Dad said, get in the car. I'm going to get in the car. And they don't have phones in which to communicate. So some of those protections for younger kids need to be, a little more, they need to be tighter.
Yeah. So when you talk about protections, let's say that, you represent mom and dad is the one with the addiction problem in this example,
Mm-hmm.
although it goes both ways.
Absolutely. But yes.
So, mom is worried that little kids, and they're young, they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, are going to get in the car with dad, and dad's going to drive drunk. What kinds of restrictions should mom be saying to her lawyer? I want these rules or these guardrails written into some kind of court order so that my kids are safe. What exactly is she asking for?
So a couple of things. There's a couple ways to go about it. So to me, the sort of, let's say, most fundamental or most common in your example, particularly when it's alcohol, is this breathalyzer I was referring to. And, the one we use are a few services, I find SoberLink to be pretty reliable. I'm not giving them a plug. They're just pretty reliable. And what you want to do is you want to have set times in which, in your example, dad will be testing. So let's say they have their parenting time, all day, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, right? Mm-hmm. That at 8:45 a.m. before they start, they have to blow. Maybe every 2 hours they have to do it, or at the beginning, the middle, and end points. They have to blow in to sober length. When it gets egregious, and remember, there's usually a fight. The addicted party, the first step in recovery is admitting that you have a problem. So, and that's a big challenge. So they're not necessarily admitting I have this problem. So there's often can be a fight to get there. But I have had situations where you have, there are devices that the breathalyzer is actually hooked up to somebody's car, and the car won't start if there's a blood alcohol content.
Right.
Those get, typically, those can be harder to get because there's generally a fight. If there are DUIs involved, or if somebody has blown positive into a sober link while they've had the kids, and then they're still advocating I should have time and I should be able to drive, like maybe, that could be one of the things. You probably want to have check-ins with mom. We all now have devices. So even if young children don't have phones or iPads, well, dad does, and maybe you require a FaceTime check-in, and at young ages to say, hey, we're going to have a 15-minute call. Is a 5-year-old doesn't sit there for 15 minutes, but it's a way to get eyes on the situation. So these things that's how some of the guardrails can work. We often sometimes have supervised parenting time that.
And what does that mean? Just for those people who are listening who don't, people have all kinds of ideas about what things
Mhm.
are that they're not, right? So if
Yeah.
you could explain, what do you mean by supervised parenting time?
Supervised means you're not with your kid alone. Somebody else, a responsible adult, is there. And one of the ways to do that, there are professionals you can hire who will, you're having breakfast at dad's and the supervisor's there for breakfast. Dad wants to take the kids to the park or the movie, supervisor goes too. You got to buy the supervisor a ticket. One of the ways, an alternative to that, and sometimes this is often more palatable for the addicted party to accept, and even for the kids sometimes, is you have a trusted family member. Maybe you have where, in your example, all of dad's parenting time needs to happen at grandma and grandpa's house, and they have eyes on it. Sometimes what we do is we say, well, you don't have to have a supervisor, but the nanny will be there just to help you out, right? So, but it is a method of supervision. And that, whether it's the supervisor, grandma, grandpa, the nanny, any trusted sort of friend or family member, that person needs to be aware of why they're there and what they're looking out for, just to make, to have eyes on it, and to know that they have the authority to terminate the visit, call mom in your example, and say, you got to come get the kids.
Okay, so how does somebody go about getting to that point? Because you and I both know from having been in the trenches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mom is going to say, Dad's got a drinking problem. Dad's going to say, no, I don't. And then it's that big fight, right? And the judge, who doesn't know either one of them, has no idea what's going on. So if let's say you're representing mom, what kind of evidence are you asking her to collect? Besides, like if dad doesn't have the DUI, what should she be looking for? What proof should she be getting that's enough to say to the judge, hey, we're not saying he's addicted or he's not addicted, but there's this proof, this evidence. You don't want the kids driving with drunk dad, right? So what is she looking for, or he looking for, depending?
Sure. So it's a great question, because it's always, in a lot of ways, one of the biggest hurdles to do right out of the gate, right? And so for those listening, if you have yet to file for divorce, or if you're on the verge, or if you're still starting, you're still living together, keep a journal, and take photos, you know, uh,
Photos of what?
of if let's stay on your example of dad has a substance abuse issue of dad being passed out, of dad if there are drugs, because it's really helpful. So a lot, very typically in this day and age, the addicted party is functional. They have a job. So let me give you two examples of what I mean where this really helped carry the day. You make the accusation. I have one right now, a case going on right now, where dad's a lawyer, and mom took photos of a white powdery substance spilled all over the house. It was in the kids' playroom. It was everywhere. Dad, when we went in on an emergency, when we had these photos, dad showed up and was saying that it was caffeine powder. And he
What?
had, right, a little vial of caffeine powder, and it's not cocaine, but it's caffeine. Right now, it becomes not believable. And the judge can at least say, okay, I'm not going to say it's cocaine, but I am going to order you to go get an immediate hair follicle in your analysis, and we'll see if there's cocaine in your system, right? So that at least gives an avenue to the judge. Another thing I've had, and I've had this a lot, one I have going on right now is actually mom who's the alcoholic. She's got a big job. And one of the things with her job is she always has events at night where she drinks too much. So dad was taking pictures of her completely passed out in her work clothes. And at one point, I had him, I said, look, next time, they were living together, so he had eyes on the kids, but the divorce was ongoing, and so he knew eventually she was gonna move out. He videoed her, and he was videoing saying, he was saying, mom, 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 help, emergency, fire, help, mom, right? The kids were not around for this, of course. And mom's passed out cold. And so we filed our emergency, and mom said, what are you talking about? I have drinks after work. And we played the video, and that carried the day.
Okay, so I just have to ask because I
Yeah.
have so many clients ask me this question. It's like, is it legal to do that? Is it legal to take a video of somebody without their consent or to record them without their consent? Everybody wants to do that, and I know there's some rules and fine lines there.
It's so as a very general premise, you're not allowed to record somebody with that if they don't know about it.
Right.
That being said, in this issue, there's really two things at play. One, you're not hiding it because you have the camera out and your video, it's not a hidden camera or a hidden recording. And also when you're talking about some immediate safety issues of the kids, it's the lawyers can't ever advise to do anything illegal, but also the you never get there because in this situation, mom, what does she say? She's passed out cold in her work clothes. She's passed out on the bathroom floor.
Let's talk though about those people because you and I both know. I mean, I think when most people think of alcoholism or drug addiction, you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the homeless person on the
Right.
street who's got no money. But you and I both know that there are a lot of high level, very wealthy people who have serious addiction issues,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
So let's talk about that person, like who's got the high level job. And let's say you're the lower earning spouse or the stay at home spouse. Now, you know that if you bring to light that your spouse has, let's talk drug addiction because that's more socially unacceptable than
Sure.
alcohol, right? So
Sure.
let's say you've got that evidence. Where do you walk the line? Because you can prove your spouse has a drug addiction and now they just lost their job and now you have no money to support your family.
That's right. You have to be careful. There is a balance, and part of that is on the lawyer to walk that fine line to make sure that, like, hey, look, we want the kids to be safe, and we want, this man in your example to be able to keep his job because he's
Right.
providing support for the family. And so there is that fine line to walk. And it's really on the lawyer to make sure they're doing it artfully, because you need to be really strategic about it. There are certain, over the years, what has come up, really also since COVID, these have grown in popularity, some treatment facilities that are designed around the addicted executive.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell
So
me
they
more
really,
about those.
there's no, like, you don't go inpatient, you don't go to group meetings. They come to you, they come to your house because it's more discreet. You have this really one-on-one treatment program, sometimes two-on-one, not with another person going through the treatment, but another addiction counselor. And, they help. A lot of their counseling is around how can you stay functioning? How can you stay high performing without this substance abuse, without the need of this substance that you're abusing? They're very expensive, but they also, I have found, they work.
That's interesting. What do you think makes them work, whereas other programs maybe aren't as successful?
I mean, look, first and foremost, in order for any program to work, at some point you need the buy-in of the person going through the treatment.
Mm-hmm.
They have to say, I, okay, I admit, now I want to get healthy. And I I think part of the difference is for people who have big jobs, who are executives, who are high performing, I think they view themselves often, I'm generalizing, differently. That, that's not me. I'm not addicted. I haven't hit rock bottom. And the reason I can prove I haven't hit rock bottom is my career. Look,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an addiction. Look at my career. Look at how successful I am. Look at the money I earn. Look how I'm doing. I don't get fired. I'm not those other people. And so having that more tailored experience, and I'm guessing here, and I've had clients who have gone through it. I've been on the side where I represent the non-addicted spouse where they go through it. So in my experience, they can say, well, that's not me. I have this sort of very highly specialized counseling, and it can fit into their persona of, I'm getting the VIP treatment here. And so it's worked. It's expensive, but it's worked.
Wow, I really like that. That sounds like it would be like exactly what people need. Do they do that for just alcohol, or does that include drug addictions as well?
Drugs as well, over the past, since the code, in the early parts of 2020, right, when we had the COVID lockdown, my phone was ringing off the hook because people's addictions really ratcheted up, or the non-addicted spouse really had to pay attention because there was nowhere to go. There were no
Yeah.
bars, there were no after work events, right? But alcohol, uh, the drugs, oftentimes it's cocaine, but really also prescription. People are abusing prescription medications, whether it's opioids, painkillers, or they're getting into their kids' ADHD medication. They're getting into their kids' Adderall.
No way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people colloquially refer to it as Diet Coke, because if
But
if
then
you
what do they
have
give their
ADHD,
kids?
yeah, if you have ADHD, the way, it's a stimulant, But the way the chemical works in your brain is you're having a dopamine deficiency or dopamine shortage. So the stimulant actually smooths you out, calms you down. If you don't have ADHD, the stimulant stimulates you.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't even have words for that. That one's a new one on me. I had not.
Oh, yeah. There are ADHD medication shortages in our country, like terribly. A big part of the reason are people who are abusing the medications. Now, the studies are showing a big part of that abuse are really college age kids, where the kid who has ADHD on the dorm is either sharing or selling his pills to. So that's partly where there's this shortage. But oh yeah, I've had parents who the ADHD meds are running low, too quickly, and yeah.
All right, so let me throw you a scenario. Let's say that there's a spouse, and you represent the spouse who is non-addicted, and the
Mm-hmm.
addicted spouse, super high functioning, big job, makes a lot of money, doesn't have a problem, right? They're not going to admit it.
Right.
And there are kids, but the kids are older. So you're not worried about putting those guardrails up around parenting so much, but that person is afraid that their spouse is someday, like the train is coming down the tracks at them, the light is shining, and someday they're going to crash and burn, right?
Yeah.
Someday they're going to hit rock bottom, they're going to lose their job, maybe they've lost a job in the past, right? So
Yeah.
the non-addicted spouse is looking at this saying, I need that income to get back on my feet after the divorce. I'm afraid of what's going to happen in the future, and I don't want to cause them to go down the tubes faster, right? I don't want to be the cause of their pain. I still fundamentally love this person. However, I don't love their addiction and I can't live with it anymore. What would you counsel that person to do differently in their divorce and their negotiation and what they agree to,
Sure.
and in whether they even do this, because they just have so much guilt, so much doubt. Like, how do you deal with that?
So it's a good question. So one thing you said, that's important, that I find a lot of is in addiction related divorces, the non-addicted spouse, they didn't fall out of love with the person, which makes it really hard. You said it right. They can't live like this anymore. And they live like on this day-to-day basis. Today's a good day, today's a bad day. They're afraid to leave because they have eyes on the person, and they're worried, if I file for divorce, they're going to get worse. Hey, they're doing great, I don't want to file because they're going to fall off the wagon. Hey, they're not doing great, I don't want to make this worse. So it's really hard for them, because they haven't necessarily fallen out of love. You just can't live like that anymore. That being said, in your example, let's say there's no kid, like kids are older, they're grown, they're in college, or they're out of college, or there's just no kids. You want to make sure, to the best you can, you want to get as much, essentially, of the assets as you can up front. So let's say we have a scenario, let's stay on your example of dad's the earner, and mom would be entitled, or the wife in this scenario would be entitled to maintenance, formerly alimony, now maintenance. She's going to get support. To the extent you can get a buyout of that, whether a full or partial, here's your money up front. You should strongly consider it, because for what you said, this person, they're not, even though they may have this job, even if they haven't lost their job before, if they struggle with addiction, it might show up at work and they lose their job and they're out. And I've had situations where the addicted person works for a government entity. And when then they're fired, for having addiction issues, they can't get rehired in that sort of sector. So let's say somebody works for CPS, for Chicago Public Schools. Well, it's right in their database that you're on the no hire, potentially you can be on the no hire list for whatever reason. If they showed up to school drunk, you're going to be on the no hire list, and then you cannot work at CPS again. So you're going to want to get as much as you can on the front end for these reasons.
That makes sense, but let's talk about that
Mm-hmm.
because I think a lot of people um, they don't understand the concept of present value, right? So they look and they say, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to get support. Let's say, the spousal support was going to be, I'm making up a number, $5,000 a month. That's $60,000 a year. They were going to get it for 10 years. And so they're like, okay, then I should get $600,000. Why is that wrong?
So the reason why that's wrong is you do a couple things. If you say, hey, look, and I'm going to make up the numbers. Let's say instead of you'd get 600,000 if you got 5,000 a month over your time period, but we say, look, you're going to get 450 or 500,000 right now today, and then no maintenance. The reason why you take less, there's really a variety of reasons. Mainly, one is the present day value of money, right? The value of money typically decreases over time to where, when a gallon of milk, when you hear, your grandparents say it was a nickel, well, it's not necessarily that milk has gotten that much more expensive to produce. It's that the value of the dollar, buying power of a dollar, decreases over time. One of the other reasons is the guarantee. You have your money now. You can invest it. Do you want your money now or do you want your money later? Right? There's a value of having your money in hand for you to do what you want with it and not have to wait to get it in $5,000 monthly increments over 10 years. You get it now. You can make that money work for you more. The third and final reason is, there are statutory factors that can limit or eliminate your receipt of maintenance. So let's take your example and say the person says, no, I want the full 600,000 over 10 years. And they're 4 or 5 years into receiving maintenance, and they meet somebody and they want to move in with that special somebody. Well, you either can't, because if you start what's called cohabitating, you lose your maintenance, period. Like, unless you've agreed otherwise, people generally don't. Maintenance is over. It's done. It's gone. Or if you get remarried, it's over. They don't even need to file a motion to terminate it. If you're living with somebody, that's it. So you can move on with your life. You have more freedoms. One of the statutory factors that eliminate it is if you die as the recipient, the person paying, your ex, doesn't pay your estate. And if you're saying, well, why would I care? I've died. Well, you would still have all that maintenance and all that money in your estate. You want to leave it to your kids. You want to leave it to your cousin. You want to leave it to your cat. It's your money to do what you want with. So you take a discount for all those reasons. And again, kind of circling it back to your question is, think about that. If you're worried that somebody has an addiction issue and they may not be able to pay you the $5,000 a month, if they go into court after 4 years and say, I lost my job, well, court's going to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
But if you get your money now, you don't have to, it's kind of not your problem.
Yeah, I think that's something that people, they don't really understand.
Right.
And they don't realize that they think that just because it's in a court order and there it says you're going to get maintenance for X amount of time, that you're really going to get it for that amount of time, no matter what. And
Right.
you and I both know that that's not always true.
That's right. Or let's say the person, they lose their job and they get rehired somewhere. but at half the pay. Well, your maintenance is going to get significantly reduced.
Yeah, those are all good reasons. So let's segue a little bit into porn addiction because you said that you've seen more of that over time.
Oh yeah.
Um, how does that affect a divorce case? What happens differently in a case that a divorce that involves pornography?
So, when you're talking about porn addictions, the main thing really two things you're looking for. One is if there are kids, if they have any exposure to this, because you can't, typically how we figure this out are somebody calls and they're like, my 8-year-old was messing around on dad's computer, or dad left this up on the screen, or dad used the kid's iPad, and right. So you're really trying to limit, that's the exposure the kids have. The other is people spend significant amounts of money paying for this. They
How does that factor into a divorce? It's just like the money's gone, they paid it. Like, how does that affect a divorce?
So it's really about the concept called dissipation. Right? The legal definition of dissipation is the use of marital money for a non-marital purpose at the time the marriage is breaking or broken down. What that means is generally about 8 out of 10 times that's a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Hey, I have a side piece and we went to Vegas together, or we went to Paris and I paid for it. But the other times it's one of the times, it can be gambling, it can be pornography. People spend a lot of money on pornography. And so those funds spent on it may have to be essentially returned or credited back to the marital estate. And so, let's just say you're 50-50ing estate. If you spent $10,000 on pornography, you may owe your spouse $5,000.
Okay, so would this, and I assume, just for the sake of the audience,
Yeah.
that the same thing would be true if the money was spent on a call girl service or prostitutes or, other kind, it's not pornography, but it's the same kind of
Yeah.
activity.
Yeah, absolutely. The same exact thing applies. There's an added element when you're talking, if there's like a sex addiction, and a lot of times those sex addictions are really, they manifest with people, hiring prostitutes. And the thing you have to be careful of, or sometimes what comes out, is if there are any sexually transmitted diseases.
Yeah.
As a result, when in those cases, let's stay on this example of dad having the addiction. If dad contracts a sexually transmitted disease and passes it to mom, or the husband gets it and passes it to the wife, in the divorce, they often could be liable for any past sort of medical bills or future medical issues that the wife has as a result of contracting this sexually transmitted disease because of what the husband was doing. It could go on forever. So if you say, hey, we've bought you out of maintenance or whatever it is, the medical bills and the medical liability can go on forever.
Is that the kind of thing that the wife could negotiate because she doesn't know what her medical is going to be, but could there be a provision in her divorce paperwork and her settlement that says he will continue to pay all of the medical bills associated with this?
Yeah, I actually had one of those this year. I represented husband who was the one who passed along HPV. And she was having no symptoms, but there is a risk of there's a cancer risk. And so, we negotiated terms that said, look, if this ever comes up where she has cancer, and one of the tricks is you have to be able to say, okay, but you have to be able to point to HPV being a contributory factor.
Right.
That yeah, he could have some liability.
All right, let's take this concept of dissipation and move it into the area of gambling, which you touched on. Because
Hmm.
gambling is an addiction where, you could literally gamble away your entire life's savings, right? The entire marital estate, right? So what happens when one spouse, let's make it the woman in this case, just to be fair, because we've been making the guy
Yeah,
the
yeah,
addict the whole time.
we've been picking on the guys.
All right. So in this case, it's the woman who has the gambling addiction. And she's literally, without her husband's knowledge, gambled away a significant portion, maybe all of the marital estate. So, okay, so the guy's entitled to get reimbursed for half of what she lost, but where's it coming from?
Yeah, so that was what can be if that money is like poof, it's gone, and there's no money to make up for it, then you may have to just negotiate essentially a structured reimbursement of that, of like, hey, look, you're going to pay 10,000 a year, 1,000 a month, whatever it is, to compensate for that.
Wow. And how does in a gambling addiction, because it's a little trickier, what kind of information, evidence is mom looking for to prove, or that would, to prove to a judge, dad has this problem, dad gambled away the money versus made a bad investment in the stock market, let's say.
Yeah, so that's the fight, right? You get that a lot with the when you're talking about investments, and that's not typically going to be dissipation. You know, my first boss always used to tell me a story. You know, it was clearly made up. You know, he said, you know, husband comes home and says, "I bought a thoroughbred racehorse," uh, uh, and the wife says, why would you do that? That's your horse. I want nothing to do with it. I can't believe you spent all our money on a racehorse. And then a year later, the horse wins the Kentucky Derby. And you say, well, great. Now we have our horse, right? That's
Yeah,
the way it works. Like, if you're going to share in the good investments, you have to share in the bad investments.
right.
Gambling is getting easier to prove in this day and age because people who gamble a lot, let's say that you have somebody going to the casino. They the casinos comp the gamblers, the high volume gamblers, or even if it's high dollar, they comp them. They comp, you know, whether it be meals or hotel rooms or concert tickets. And in order to comp them, they have what's called these ratings cards. So every bet is logged on the ratings card because that's the way they get comp. That's how they know how much you're gambling. It's not they're just watching you, you know, keeping tabs. You have a card. It's like a rewards card. You can, and the lawyers should, subpoena the rewards card. It gives you every single bit of information. It gives you every bet, every dollar amount, the table they were at, the time they did it, if they won. So that's some of it too. Sometimes they show, you say, hey, look, you came out ahead this year. Where's the money? So that's how that becomes easier. Now, you know, sports gambling, you know, you see like DraftKings commercials every 5 seconds on TV. You know, if you're watching like football on a Sunday, these DraftKings things come up. ESPN has their own betting sites. Same thing. Everything's online. It's all logged. You send a subpoena, they send you every bet that was made.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
that's the way to, in large part, to prove that. One of the carve outs, one of the things I find is you get people who say, hey, look, my husband or my wife, they play fantasy football or fantasy baseball, and they sent their buddy $200 a year. Like, knock it off. It's not worth the lawyer's fees. That's a game, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's huge money, maybe, but stay away from that stuff. But you're going to spend more on lawyers' fees.
Yeah.
But go, you know, this leads me to back to one of your questions about proof. One of the ways you prove alcohol as well is, if somebody goes to the grocery store and they put in their phone number to get the rewards points, well, that tracks all your purchases. So if you're not supposed to be drinking, or say, I don't drink, and you bought hamburgers and you bought deli meat and you bought cheese and you bought 10 bottles of vodka, that will show up.
Yeah, it's not like just like a regular credit card purchase. You just get the total, but if it's again, those
Yeah,
rewards cards will really get you.
they track everything, right? All these companies want your data, so they're logging your data. It's why they give you rewards, so they track your data, so they know what to sell to you. And so you just subpoena Jewel, subpoena Whole Foods,
The, Mitch, this is total gold for somebody who's trying to divorce someone with an alcohol or any kind of addiction issue. And we could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
I want to be respectful of your time. So, if somebody is dealing with this issue and they're in Illinois and they want to look you up, or even if they're not in Illinois and they want to look you up, where's the best place that they can find you?
The best place to find me and learn about me is probably my website, which is bradfordandgordon.com, BRADFORDANDGORDON.com. If you want to call me, I'm at 312-346-6911. I'm happy to talk through it. I've been doing this 23 years now, and the addiction is really, you need a lawyer that knows how to handle this, because it's different, and it can be complex, and you need to be sensitive to certain things. You need to be strategic about many things, and so I'm always happy to even just talk through with people.
That's awesome. Mitch, thank you so, so much. And for anyone listening or watching, we're going to link to all of this stuff to your website. We'll put your phone number. All the things are going to be in the show notes. So thank you so much. And
Thanks for having me, Karen.
I'm thrilled. And for those watching and listening, if you like this show, if you enjoyed today's content, if you want more of it, do me a big favor. Like, subscribe wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching. And I look forward to talking with you again next time.